What happens when someone refuses to change? When an individual takes a good, hard look at themselves and says, "No, I'm walking gold just the way I am," or simply refuse to look in the mirror in the first place. That is the pattern we see reflected in the puppet master of Psychonauts 2, Gristol Malik. Up until now, everyone Raz encountered had a desire to better themselves, from the damaged minds in Thorny Towers to those traumatized from the Battle of Grulovia. Even if they do not have the strength or resources to crawl from their allegorical wells on their own, they are open to others throwing down a rope. As the saying goes, the first step in recovery is admitting there is a problem. The Zazarovich, on the other hand, is unwilling to take the first step. Ultimately, it is everyone's right to decide what to do with their own lives. Gristol, however, was hell-bent on becoming a danger not only to the Psychonauts, but eventually the entire world. That is, if his mental image of himself standing on top of the earth is a guide to go by. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before delving too deep into his rigid mentality, let's get back to the story where we left off. Raz and Crawler were inside Lucy's head attempting to bury the Maligula complex when the boy was unceremoniously pulled away by our imposter. Despite the facade of concern, Lili and Raz sense something is off about him. In order to satisfy their curiosity, the pair elects to go inside and investigate. Let's officially head on into Fatherland Follies. For a fraud, it is not surprising that the foyer of his mind is a dressing room. Littered around the perimeter are signs of the deception, clues left so the actor can learn the lines. Figments of clothing fill the racks. In the center, a plaster statue of Truman that acts as the Mindscape's Maltese falcon. When the plaster veneer cracks, a golden effigy of Nick, aka Gristol, is revealed, this story's man behind the curtain. In a certain sense, Gristol has played the role of an archetypal trickster. When the need arises, he simply swaps clothing. If everyone will permit one of my trademark random segues, we can use the language of fairy tales to classify him as a tailor by profession. To paraphrase the Swiss psychologist Marie-Louise von Franz, in those days, the trade of the tailor was a wise choice for small men, who compensate for their weakness with wit and skill. Moreover, the tailor makes clothes for other people. Generally, we interpret the clothes as having to do with the persona, for we cover up the naked truth of our personality. This is Gristol's characterization in a nutshell, a weak man who compensates for his shortcomings with his intelligence and ability to shapeshift. At the end of the day, our antagonist is a non-psychic who brought the psychic world to its knees. While the concept of the Jungian persona is well known after being popularized in the Megaten franchise, let's go over it anyway. The word persona originates from the masks worn by actors in the Age of Antiquity. By wearing one, the actor took on the characteristics of what the mask represents, the audience only seeing the false image. As seen further on in Fatherland Follies, this wardrobe change occurred during the events of Rhombus of Ruin. At some point, Gristol contracted Dr. Lobato to kidnap Truman and spirit him away down to the Rhombus. This is where the brains and bodies were exchanged. The details are on full display in this section of the mental world. Now that he looks the part, Gristol is ready to infiltrate the mother lobe. But this is a fantastical representation of the idea. In real life, these are far more subtle. I beg everyone's forgiveness for this next section. Some of it will be relevant for Gristol, and others will just be because I find it interesting. Every day, all of us project different personalities. The one we wear for our boss, the one we wear for our friends, for our family, our significant other, or random strangers in the street. The way we swap through these masks gives us the trait of the shapeshifter archetype. We do this out of necessity. If we spoke to our boss the way we speak to our family, we would likely be fired. We adapt our personality and appearance to fit into certain situations. Think of a man in a business suit during the day joining a mosh pit by night. The idiom "letting your hair down" sums up how the same person can go from professional to relaxed with the proverbial change of hairstyle. In general, we do this to conceal our vices, project false virtue, or to simply fit in. As we grow, it is easy to betray our authentic self for any or all of these reasons. While it can be easy to simply say be your authentic self all the time, the cold hard truth is the abilities of the shapeshifter give one the best opportunity for success. In business, we frequently must swallow our pride, lest we risk being fired, losing a sale, or angering a customer. I'm sure everyone has heard the preamble, "once you get to know me," implying that in new relationships, we do not show who we really are. Over time, the mask slips when we feel comfortable enough to show our true face. At least if the relationship is healthy. Unfortunately, it is all too common to maintain a persona long past its expiration date. In this scenario, one risks the ego and the persona becoming coiled so tight they become indistinguishable, even to the individual themselves. Some research has suggested that maintaining this false self can lead to a side effect that mimic psychasthenia. Originally, this term was injected into the psychology world by the French psychologist and philosopher Pierre Janet in his 1903 publication, Obsessions and Psychasthenia. Quote, "We might define the psychasthenic individual as someone unable to turn off the noise in their mind, the worry that erodes their spirit, and the problems that they don't know how to solve. This continuous rumination subjects them to great exhaustion and deep defenselessness. Moreover, they experience a great lack of control over what happens around them." While this term has been downgraded to a mere personality trait and absent from the DSM-5 altogether, it encompasses various symptoms including general anxiety, depression, and compulsions. So what does this have to do with personas? Studies have been done that suggest that the symptoms associated with psychasthenia are a byproduct of maintaining the persona for too long. At the end of the day, these masks are produced by the mind to protect the ego from perceived threats. If the mask slips away, then the ego is left unguarded. The individual may develop a degree of anxiety that people will see through their mask. Compulsive rituals may be performed to maintain the false self, all done out of the fear that they will be revealed as an imposter, the mental terror that we will be exposed as the emperor with no clothes. For Gristol, this facade of Nick Johnsmith from the mailroom is torn away when Raz breaks through the plaster veneer to reveal the golden effigy beneath. What happens when the persona is not only worn out in public, but in private? It is said that the biggest liar hides in the mirror. As we will see moving forward, Gristol has an issue in both self-perception and the truth of his own history. After being vacuumed up and deposited into a new part of the mind, Raz and Lili witness firsthand who is responsible for the recent troubles. While the outward projecting mask is removed, the inward-facing mask remains. Gristol himself becomes the audience for this performance. This happens as the royal garb falls from the sky, Nick being replaced with the heir to the Grulovian Throne. As an added detail, his caviar belly immediately flattens to mirror his self-image. This change of self-concept is similar to how Coach Oleander was taller in his mental vaults than he was in reality. Using the language of this video, it is common to trick ourselves with a mask crafted to protect our own ego. The reason for this is either conscious or unconscious, an unwillingness to accept something, or simply being oblivious of its existence. For now, Raz and Lili get in line for the show. It is apparent from this room that the man has an overinflated opinion of himself. The walls are covered with his own portraits, while a red carpet is rolled out for him. The worker claims VIPs only, and for all common folk to get out of the way. Rose is being thrown at his feet by invisible people, while the unseen crowd cheers. Only figments of his imagination wait in line for the ride. His robes descend from heaven in holy light, marking Gristol's belief in his divine right to rule. It is apparent that he believes himself better than anyone by default. To put it simply, the man is a full-blown narcissist. This is defined simply as a grandiose sense of self-importance, a lack of empathy, and a need for admiration. Everyone on Earth possesses aspects of this trait to some degree, but it varies in intensity as we will discuss. Healthy narcissism is merely the ability to recognize your own self-worth, to be proud of your accomplishments and understand that you deserve good things. Vulnerable narcissism is characterized by low self-esteem but craving the attention of the spotlight. They appear shy and empathetic, but the goal of their actions is external validation, craving to be seen as greater than they feel. Neither of these describes our subject. However, the next two do. Collective narcissism observes the perceived superiority of a group over others. Gristol is of the opinion that being of Grulovian blood makes one innately superior. Through the clairvoyance ability, he sees Raz as royalty, taking a liking to the boy simply because of his ancestry. Grandiose narcissism comes with a sense of personal superiority, and also the impulse to assert one's dominance over others. From this, the spectrum of narcissistic traits are clear. On one side is rooted an objective appraisal of one's virtues while accepting one's vices. The other is an unrealistic or subjective assessment of one's capabilities while rejecting any shortcomings. One talks the talk, and the other walks the walk. The question being, is your sense of self-worth based upon something real or imagined? To further complicate this, sometimes we hyperfixate on a single virtue and allow it to die the rest of our self-concept. A few terms for this are somatic, cerebral, and moral narcissism. Somatic being when the inflated self-image is derived from one's body, feeling stronger or more beautiful than others. Cerebral is when the ego focuses on their intelligence and feeling smarter to others around them. Moral is when one's ideology is perceived to be of higher moral virtue, hence why negative actions upon others can be justified. All of us have experienced people who bear these traits, and if we are being honest, even recognize it in ourselves on occasion. That being said, this alone does not classify one as possessing narcissistic personality disorder. The DSM-5's criteria requires a score of 55% before the person is recognized as possessing NPD. Again, there is a healthy relationship that can be had as long as our self-concept aligns with reality, rather than Gristol possessing an overinflated opinion of himself that is incongruent with reality. It is a line between knowing your worth and a superiority complex. For those in the latter camp of grandiose narcissism, this perception must be maintained at all cost. It is said that false reality is engineered and maintained by good messaging. But propaganda is not only a thing imposed upon others, but also the emerald glasses we wear when looking in the mirror. Once Raz gets on the ride, we witness firsthand the means in which Gristol propagandizes himself, or in other words, buys into his own hype. Putting aside the obvious references to a certain theme park ride, the experience is designed to reinforce his inflated self-image and propagate a confabulated retelling of his own history. The fact that the choir is comprised of children is not lost on me, possibly a sign of the childish mindset that composed the song. To hammer this home, the amusement park workers take on the title of propagandineer. This word is from the Latin propagare, meaning to set forward, extend, spread, or increase. Eventually, it became associated with any movement or organization used to propagate some practice or ideology. This is a neutral term, though. No distinction is made between the propagation of moral versus immoral ideas, or fact versus falsehood. One could argue that school teachers propagandize their students with math, science, and language skills, since these ideas are being spread to the next generation in the classroom. With that said, as Raz goes through this little ride, he witnesses a narrative that conflicts with what he has been told in the past. Gristol's recollection of his former homeland is a utopian memory of beauty, universal love, and wealth for all. The people are happy and worship the royal family. Wood cutouts of the populace dance to the song, reveling in their glorious lives. Angels can be seen above the village square, blessing Grulovia with divine light.
Never had a nation been more prosperous, its people more content. Never was a royal family more beloved than the Maliks. Tsar Theodore, Tsarina Rokal, and the young Zazarovich, Gristol. The nation looked forward to the happy day when Gristol Malik would legally and rightfully inherit his father's throne. But alas, that was not meant to be. The Tsar's Minister of War and Protector of the People, General Maligula, had aroused the jealousy of the warmongering Ford Cruller. He led his mob of psychonauts to gang up on Maligula, drowning the brave warrior. Why didn't the Tsar help Maligula in her time of need? No one knows, but historians agree it is Tsar Theodore's biggest failure. In the end, Grulovia, the Maliks, and Maligula were betrayed by the weakness of the Tsar and the bloodlust of the Psychonauts.
These are the thoughts of a narcissistic child who cannot distinguish between the fantasy in his head and reality. All of it is designed to shield his ego from the truth, that Grulovia was an authoritarian state where the people suffered. It is said that these false narratives have their genesis when the brain's storytelling function is hijacked by cognitive biases. As mentioned in previous videos, cognitive bias is a distortion in belief, judgment, or thinking due to a subjective perception of reality. In other words, it is a mental shortcut used to rationalize information rather than examine it objectively. Instead of taking the time to understand the complexities of a situation, we simplify the data to fit into our pre-existing biases. In this situation, Gristol's memory of Grulovia is distorted, feeding into his narcissistic self-concept.
It was amazing. I had a cotton candy maker in my bedroom.
In reality, the nation was characterized by strife and poverty.
People hated the Maliks.
If that were true, then why did they unanimously re-elect us every election?
In reality, the elections were rigged to maintain tyrannical control. Acceptance of these facts means shattering the ego. All of this illusion maintained by the ride and the song playing in his head on a loop. When any voices are dissonant to the tune he is humming, they are silenced. It is a simple process. Censors remove the discordant voices, judging them all to be traitors and enemies. The ride and the song acts as an enabler for his twisted perceptions. A good example is this set piece of the battle between Maligula and Ford. He casts the Psychonauts as bloodthirsty savages attempting to destroy his home. In the end, he believes in only that which mutes the cognitive dissonance. Just below this set piece is a room where a giant effigy of Maligula stands over tiny figments of the Psychonauts in order to reinforce his belief in the power gap between the two. In this fantasy, Gristol leads the way for his parents as if he is the hero in their flight to safety. Below is the mental vault entitled Glory to Grulovia. In it, we witness Gristol's experience as royalty. Largely, he simply existed there, munching on his caviar, while servants catered to his whims and his parents ran the show. A revered status and a certain quality of life was the norm. Hardship or any ire directed towards him was non-existent. So, when he was beset by an angry mob, it triggered strong emotional reactions. These panic attacks, understandably, appear here as enemies alongside bad ideas. These ideas were possibly the association of the people with barbaric violence. As mentioned in other videos, memories charged with great emotion tend to have a stronger influence on our development. For Gristol, it formed a mental connection between Maligula and the idea of a savior. In the other vault, A Land Without Caviar, we see a complication of his worldview. After the dam disaster, Tsar Theodore was terrified that Maligula would turn on him, so he ordered her assassination. When this failed, he took his family and fled. This led them to check in at the Lady Luctopus. Eventually, his caviar ran out and he cursed a world without his special snack. While this is a rather childish response, there is a greater thing of note. If this is contained inside Gristol's memory, then he is fully aware that his father tried to kill his savior. He is fully aware of the reason behind them leaving. The vault would not show us this if he was clueless. This may be why doubts can be found in the middle of this propaganda. However, he appears to have pushed them down deep. Fleeing through the desert, the Arctic and the bottom of the ocean are mere romanticized elaborations. As an aside, the scene at the bottom of the ocean is likely an exaggerated image of the family at the Lady Luctopus, considering the nautical themes of the luxury suite. After all, the storyteller in his head is being misused to make the flight appear more dramatic than it truly was. But again, it means that the man is aware his propaganda does not match up with reality. This cognitive dissonance is resolved by him choosing fiction over fact. It is said that a complex remains at the age it was when it was formed, emotionally trapped in that state until it is dealt with. If this never occurs, the logic of that age becomes the one carried forward into adulthood. When it usurps the conscious ego, we witness an example of the eternal child. One could argue that the choir of children on the ride is a manifestation of these complexes. Gristol's childhood of luxury and simplicity was stripped from him, so that it was only natural to want it back. His desire to reconstitute the nation of Grulovia has less to do with providing a good place for others to live, or even ruling for that matter. Despite his proselytizing, it was more about returning to the consequence-free state of childhood. The desire to, allegorically, remain in Neverland. Gristol takes it to the extreme, willing to move mountains and destroy lives in order to reclaim what he feels was stolen. The developers of Psychonauts confirmed that one idea they had when crafting this character is the Peter Pan syndrome. This is more of a pop culture thing rather than a clinical diagnosis. However, the patterns of behavior it describes is something easily observable. In short, it is when an individual refuses to grow up and accept adult responsibilities, to seek out people or entities to care for you rather than become self-sufficient. Generally, a few factors can contribute to this behavior pattern. These include overprotective parenting that shields the child from accountability, childhood trauma, or poor self-confidence to the point that one presumes failure will be the result of their actions. Learned helplessness plays into this. Another expression for this whole scenario is a child's failure to launch. Gristol checks off all of these boxes. Living as the Prince of Grulovia, he was basked with a carefree childhood. His parents never required anything of him, and he was praised for nothing more than existing. Praise is a reinforcer, encouraging the child to continue with this action. The one time he was in genuine danger, Lucy arrived to save him. Again, reinforcing the belief that help comes from the outside rather than his own actions. Why learn to be more careful when his psychic caretaker can bail him out? This can be summed up with the phrase, "I do not need to take responsibility for myself because that's my parents' job." Except as we age, our parents are swapped out for some other proxy, which we adopt to fill that role. When even that is gone, we are abandoned in the wilderness with no instructions because we never learned the terrain. We see this most clearly when Raz meets Gristol in his suite in the Lady Luctopus. The place is filthy, both in the mental world and in reality. Dirty laundry draped everywhere, leftover food rotting in the bathtub and the shower, flies swarming throughout. In any other situation, this would be considered a hazardous environment to occupy. Gristol rightfully considers this place a dump, but it is a dump of his own making. His family took up occupancy in the luxury suite of the hotel. It was probably being regularly cleaned at the time. However, after their death, it appears the man-child never cleaned up after himself. After all, he never had to before, so his world degraded into a trash bin. Rather than grow up and doing something basic like cleaning up after himself, he laid down like a pig in his own filth and cried, "Woe is me." He is void of any self-reflection, never realizing that he is the cause of his own misfortune. Like all mental children, he blamed the rest of the world for his own shortcomings. The drama of the story could have been avoided if he just picked himself up by his bootstraps and said, "I'm an adult now, I'll handle this." Instead, he concocted a plan to remain in Neverland. Since he cannot do it alone, he follows the mental connection in his head to find a savior. As a child, when he was surrounded by enemies, Maligula came to his rescue. Now, she could do so again. To reclaim his lost throne meant getting his servants back. It meant getting his caviar back. But as a narcissist, he could never admit to any negative traits. His self-absorbed desire was rebranded as a benevolent act, believing his actions to be a moral good instead of selfishness. If only he directed that energy towards some other endeavor, maybe things would not have turned out the way they did. Recognizing the truth about oneself by taming the ego can be difficult for many, especially for a narcissist like Gristol. The best scene that shows this is the dialogue between himself and Raz in the gift shop. Whenever the boy tries to speak sense, Gristol twists the words or rationalizes it to feed back into his own preconceived beliefs. Cognitive biases are at work here. His entire worldview is built upon the foundation of his own inherent greatness, filtering his inflated self-image through a romanticized lens so that nothing can ever alter his perceptions. In order to elaborate this, let's dabble in creating our own psychological model from scratch. To start, I'll make a set of 4 squares. The left column is objective, and the right is subjective. Then the top row will be internal, and the bottom row, external. With this, we can separate the subjective perception and objective reality of ourselves and the world around us. Let's call it the mirror versus window test. With that, each square will get a name: self-concept, true nature, negationism, and history. The self-concept is the belief about ourselves distorted by our own cognitive biases. Here is Gristol's narcissism. True nature is an objective evaluation of ourselves without the distortion of the ego's self-defense mechanism. Negationism is the deliberate or unintentional distortion of events outside of the self. Gristol's revisionist memories fall here. History is the objective reality of external events. Everything Gristol believes about himself and the events of his childhood are willfully distorted by propaganda intended to strengthen the armor of narcissism to protect his ego. He lives in the subjective column of perceptions for both the internal and external. Raz comes along and tries to push the man into releasing psychic contents to the objective side of things, but the intern receives pushback. As the saying goes, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is not only true for physics, but for those trying to force another to accept something that threatens their worldview. In a way, it is a self-defense mechanism. If one were to try and force your hand into a pot of boiling water, you would instinctively recoil and fight to avoid getting burned. It is no different for perceived psychic threats. Raz's attempts to reason with Gristol is unconsciously perceived as an attack on the self. As a result, the man mentally fights back. This is where pyrophobia comes into play, along with another random segue. It's time to get a little weird. Leaving behind modern psychology, let's take a look at some esoteric philosophy. If we consider Gristol's cognitive biases as a machine that transmutes unwanted ideas into tolerable ones, then it behaves like a type of ego. Just instead of regulating between the id and the superego, it regulates one's perceptions of reality, both internal and external. With that said, the goal of spiritual alchemy is to take the self and refine it to a superior form. If we are the lead, then the process turns us into gold. Not literally, of course, but psychologically and spiritually. The first phase is known as calcination, and involves the metaphorical destruction of the ego. Gristol is so trapped in his own spiderweb of self-aggrandizing biases that the only way to make him honestly look at himself is if his ego is burned to ash. Depending on if you accept the synthesis of modern psychology and older philosophies, narcissism in this situation is simply a fireproof shell worn to protect the ego from calcination. After all, if you believe yourself to already be gold, why distill yourself down and coagulate into a superior version of yourself? For those that do not take themselves too seriously, this isn't that painful. But for those with a rigid self-concept made of iron, it can be terrifying. The process can be experienced willingly, or the world can do it forcefully. Hitting rock bottom or suffering a drastic shock in your life can create an epiphany that something is wrong. Once the ego is shattered, the next question is, what do you do about it? A good visualization of this is Key 16 of the Tarot, called the Blasted Tower. The tower is the rigid structure and routines we build around ourselves until a chaotic life event in the form of the lightning strike shatters the stone and sets the place on fire. This is calcination in practice. The individual has two choices: remain in the tower and burn along with your rigid beliefs, or jump from the tower to land outside the protection of the stone. While the fall may injure us, it is still a better chance of survival. although it does require things to change within one's mindscape. Raz can be considered the lightning bolt that struck Gristol's tower. The only question is, does the would-be dictator remain inside and burn alive, or does he jump to safety? Does he cling to his narcissistic self-concept and distorted recollections, or does he accept that he is in fact the villain in this story? Up until now, every single mind we have come across has chosen to leap from the tower to the promise of better mental health. My hope was that Raz smashing the record players would have some sort of effect, silencing the echo chamber of propaganda and allow Gristol to hear that which had been drowned out by the choir of children. Based upon the post-credit scene, my hopes for him were extinguished.
Those lyrics aren't true, you know.
I was there, you weren't. But look, what's past is past. Why don't you let me out of here?
Nope. Sorry. I'm sure they'll let you out of here after your trial or whatever.
Ha! Right. Trial.
Haven't you learned anything from this?
Yes! Never meet your heroes. Maligula. What a disappointment.
No lessons learned at all?
Okay, yes. Maybe I was wrong about a lot of things. But I could make it all right if I were Tsar. Being Tsar means never having to say you're sorry.
Well, good luck in there, Gristol.
Glory to Grulovia! Gristol Malik's aim.
As we see, he is still singing the propaganda. He is still rationalizing events to service his ego, actively refusing to accept he is flawed, that his beliefs are wrong. Even when he acknowledged he was mistaken about some things, it came off more like he put his trust in the wrong person rather than a fault with his own motives. Always someone else's fault, never his own. It is obvious that his aspirations have not been dimmed. Now, here he is, locked up in his own little prison, his armor too tough for the fires to burn through. Some people will never accept help no matter how much we try. The entire crowd can be trying to tell the Emperor that he has no clothes, but the man simply stands there, naked, and wonders why everyone is lying to him. Sadly, we cannot help those who do not want to change. Hopefully, in the future, things will be different for him. For now, the mental world concludes with Lili knocking him unconscious with his own merch, then the pair leave the mind. Upon returning, they try to explain the situation to the others before running off in search of the real Truman's brain. After they leave, Maligula awakens and Gristol drops to his knees to worship her like the second coming of some divine savior, further showing that as of yet, his plans have not changed. Lucy washes the Psychonauts away, and Lili runs ahead in her eagerness, leaving Raz alone to deal with his great aunt. But that is a story for next time. For now, I'll leave you all with a final thought. Beliefs are the subjective reflection of objective reality. While they are sometimes true, sometimes they are not. It is the closed-minded certainty in the subjective that is the death of reason. See you next time when Raz dives into the hurricane of Lucretia's lament. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please drop a like and subscribe to receive updates on future uploads. If you would like to help support the channel, a Patreon has been set up and the link is in the description below. Have a great day and peace be with you all.